So, hi Deb, how are you today?
Very good. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. I'm so happy to have you here because your horary course is the best one in the market, and everybody agrees with that. So, tell us a bit about how long did it take you to develop this course, and why did you decide to do this course? When did you start doing horary? Tell us a bit about your history with horary astrology.
Okay, so I started learning horary in the late 1980s with Olivia Barclay when Olivia Barclay did the QHP course. And I remember I fell in love with the subject at that point. Um, and after I qualified, I worked as a tutor for Olivia for a while. But I became very aware of, it was very much a prototype course.
Mm-hmm.
It was groundbreaking in its time, but there was a lot of material that we didn't have access to. And there were some things that I would say were not done very well through that course. So a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people would enroll onto it, and it was expected to take several years. Very few people graduated from it. And of the ones that did, what I realized is that there was still a problem that they were graduated, but they would say, I understand the theory, I can read somebody else's horror judgment and I can criticize how they've done it, but I don't want to deal with clients. I can't, I don't.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't have the confidence in practice. So after a while, after a few years, I was doing my own thing. I, did the Traditional Astrologer magazine, and I got an invitation to go over to Australia and present horror as a subject for a week-long course, and
Mm-hmm.
to gather a group of students there. There was nobody really teaching horror in astrology in Australia at that time. And so I went over and put material together to do a 1 week intensive on horror.
Mm-hmm.
Knew from the start that this had to be different from the way that I had learned it. So it was a really rewarding experience, but it was basically just a week of me putting up my own chart examples, and as a group everybody would explore what was happening, follow the technique along, understand the issues that were coming at me, because as you know, Maria, it's one thing to see the answer in a chart. There's another skill involved in communicating what you
Oh,
see
yes.
and meeting their expectations, and you know
Mm-hmm.
um, and so it was very successful. And what I understood from that was that learning horror as an academic subject is one thing to be interested in, but the practice of horror needs a whole new level of a whole new skill set. It's a whole new people person. It's an whole new astrological skill. And reading the symbolism in context each and every time and being able to create it. So as I say, the course was very well, and went very well. And for a few years after that, I was back over in Australia on a regular basis, sometimes going over to Australia and running the course in three different, cities
Mm.
and other places too. I would run it in Europe, and I developed the course originally as this very exclusive, very intimate, in attendance group experience. They were always wonderful because I would meet very intimately the students and the people that I was teaching. And throughout the week, we would be so absorbed in horror. We would relax in the evenings and still talk about horror and
Oh,
clients.
yes.
Um, and so, yeah, it was wonderful, and I realized that is the best way to learn to teach somebody, because if they understand from the start the importance of applying it in practice, the theory can be honed over time. But if
Mm-hmm.
you come into this subject thinking that you can learn it through books, you are going to spend years in frustration and confusion, because you need a guide to help you understand the people dynamics, the
Mm-hmm.
how the art has to be crafted. So that was my original prototype of what became the course. And over the course of developing that and presenting it, it would be remodeled and reshaped with every presentation. So after a while, when I was over in Australia, and people would always ask for feedback and satisfaction,
Mm-hmm.
surveys with the students, and they were always very positive, but they would give me bits of advice. So, at one
Yeah.
stage,
Yeah.
originally, I was just showing charts on an overhead projector. They were just, and then somebody said, this would be really great if we could all have copies of the charts to keep, and we can, revise them.
Mhm.
So the next iteration, all the students had copies of the charts so they could make their own notes and discuss as groups. Then another one, somebody said, wouldn't it be great if we had some of the bullet points on the interpretation principles? So I started writing some bullet points, and then somebody said, oh, if we could get a bit more about how that theory works. So over a period of maybe 15 years, the course
Mhm.
developed slowly in response to, improvements and needs. I was always very adamant that I only wanted to teach that way. I didn't want this to be an online course. I wanted it. I loved the intimacy. I loved the, that really close sense of guidance that you get from somebody that's experienced with a subject,
Mhm.
passing it on to somebody who is sincerely wanting to know it, and to be able to share the hints and the tips and the little confidential things that you wouldn't want to put in a book, or the
Mhm.
examples that
Mhm.
wouldn't want to put out there in public. You want to keep them a little bit confidential, but you want to share them with up and comings. So I was very reticent to develop this as an online course until it was almost forced upon me. And at that stage, there was a whole new level of development. It was run for a few years, and then I wasn't happy at all um, with how it was originally as an online course. So I kind of like halted it and said, this has all got to be redone in a different, we've got to keep that intimacy, but we've got to build in all the advantages of the internet and modern technology, but never lose sight of the fact that this is not something for commercial consumption. This is an apprenticeship. We're in an esoteric subject. We want to keep that sense of group companionship of people learning together. So it took a few more years, and I think it was around 2019, 2020 that I felt really proud of the whole thing.
Oh, yes.
Excitement, keeping them focused, giving them
Mhm.
answers, but never losing. You learn through the practice. We learn, discover the theory, but it is always seeking an aim of making you better astrologers, so that when you are dealing with a real client and somebody with a need, you're not going to let that person down. You're going to deal with them. So that's
Yeah, I remember I took it for the first time in 2017, and then I took it again in 2018 with Lee in New York, and then I took it again in 2020, and the experience was a different one. So my experience with this course is it's a process. It's a process, and it's developing all the time. And I was really impressed with how generous you were with the information, because what you're giving us in this course is many years of experience, of your own experience, and you're just giving it to people, And another thing that I thought was really,
giving it, because they do purchase the course, but once and
yeah, but you're
publicly.
not holding anything back. That's the feeling one has. You're giving it all.
Yeah, yes, I am passionate about this subject. I would say that it defines my life as a person, my
Mhm.
philosophy as a person. It is not just, something that I do. I really sincerely and seriously love astrology and love horror in particular because of its ability to heal and, what it can do for people. So when I have the privilege of connecting with somebody that is coming through the same stream that I swam in, yeah, I
Mhm.
want to give them everything. And there's no sense of, I will share everything I've got, the good and the bad, the honesty. And if somebody gets to a point where, they ask me a question and my answer is, I don't know, I'm still
Okay.
sort that out, that is what I will give, because, it's like
Yeah.
I'm teaching my younger self.
Of course, of course. And Deb, why this need to share this course with communities that speak other languages? Because I know that right now you have this course available in Spanish, and I think it's in Greek, in Chinese, in many languages. Why? Where did this come from? When did this start? This
Never,
need?
there was never a plan to do that, Maria. There was never a plan for anything I've done in life. I've always followed my creative drift, and I've done what suits me at this time, and some things have, taken on a life of their own. So I never sat down and thought I want a course and I want it in different languages. I want it international. Never. But in the process of delivering the course and meeting with some exceptional astrologers who blow me away with their talent, and it is quite clear that they have got the same drive that I've got, the same instinct to teach. So I have been very privileged, really, I think, to be able to meet with people like yourself,
Oh,
Vasilios Takos in Greece, who the very first time that I heard him, I remember Vasilios begging me he wanted to get on a course, but it was full. And I was saying, I'm sorry, but that course is full. And, he was emailing back, and he wasn't begging me, but he was insisting that he needed to be on that course, and he couldn't wait another 6 months. And it was very important to him. And I replied a couple of times, I said, no, I'm sorry, I would if I could, but there is a limit. And, eventually he said, but this is important. And I was like, okay, we'll get you on this. And I never knew who he was until it was just this nuisance on email, until he appeared in a session, and I heard him speak for the very first time. And in the very first instant, I recognized a kindred spirit of great maturity and wisdom. And throughout the rest of the course, there was this sense of, yeah, he's a teacher. He's learning this now, but he knows it already. And you get that feeling with certain people, and you realize that this is part of you're learning from them, they're learning from you. We're all swimming in the same stream together. And so obviously, when you get the connection, and horary depends on you having a good sense of instinct and judgment. So the same instinct and judgment that leads me in making a judgment on a chart is the same instinct that makes me have a judgment to think, yeah, that is something that should be developed, and I should help that person. And if they're interested in translating and teaching, then I am buying in with them and sharing what I've got with them. So it's never been a plan. It's just always been a consequence of something that's just seemed very, very natural. And with you, Maria, I think the fact that you took the course 3 times.
4. 4.
times. I kind of worried that you shouldn't have needed to take it 4 times, but then it.
It's because I enjoyed it so much, and every time I take it, and even when I was translating it, I always learn something new. That's with horary. I mean, it always surprises you. It's so incredible. It's such a wonderful technique.
Some of my chart examples, I've been showing them now for many years. And it's always interesting to me that another time I showed them and I still see something new in that chart that I hadn't even noticed before. And it is the content of the chart, of the course, is very rich, as you know, because even though it's led by practice, in order to make the practice better, we have to look at the theoretical principles and what they are, the philosophy they are coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Good horary is not about learning more, it's about refocusing. Taking out, eliminating the weak points, finding the stronger points, strengthening the symbolism, and understanding the philosophy of where that symbolism is coming from, so that you're not remembering things, but you're drawing things that are natural. And I think that there is a lot of material, as you know, the synodic cycles and their influence on things, that do need to be gone through several times. Not that it can't be understood the first pass, but going over it again, you see something further, and there's more to that. It's like reception. Reception makes sense. Then you think about it at another level, and that makes even more sense now. And then you connect it with another technique, and now that technique makes more sense, and this makes more sense, and it grows and strengthens and just gets simpler as it gets.
Yeah, I have an anecdote regarding synodic cycles. At the beginning, it was part of the master course, not of the practitioner's course. So the first time I took it, I remember crying because I just couldn't get it. And Wade was my teacher for the masters, and he said, once you learn it, you'll never forget it. So what I do when I teach your course, because you talk about, you introduce cyanotic cycles at the beginning, third or fourth session. So I remember insisting on this for the next 5 or 6 sessions, you know? And it's incredible because at first students are a bit worried, when will I understand this? And then it comes to them naturally. It's just, you know, oh yes, this isn't at the beginning of its cycle, so it's incredible. Once you get it, it's there forever.
Modern astrologers are learning astrology from books, and we are not learning them as cycles that we attach to what we observe in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
Historically, all those principles came from what we see and, you know, we perceive. And when we take a modern student and we tell them that those cycles that are being formed, they need conceptualization. You need to be able to understand the cycles and as they appear and disappear, and visualize and conceptualize in your head.
Mm-hmm.
And different skill, because astrologers are taught to learn from books.
Mm-hmm.
And so they've got to be able to understand the cycles and imagine them and feel them and, you know, like, and observe them. And once they do that, not only is it natural, and once you crack it, it's also so obvious and so powerful.
Yeah.
You never go backwards. So it's worth pushing against the strain. And for as much as it hurt you to learn it, Maria, can you imagine how many hairs I pulled out of my head trying to think it through, just rediscover it and write it? Because at that time, when I think it was around 2006 or 2000 and around the late 2000s, I must have spent 10 years, you know, like trying to crack what people are talking about and why in the historical. Because it was always a given that the reader understood. And it wasn't understood by me. So I had to go, and there was very, very little. You know, I could only find the information in the historical texts. I do remember after I wrote something about one of the cycles, and somebody said and I sent it for publication in the Mountain Astrologer, and one of the editors there said, should we credit, is it Erin, who was the person that wrote the book on, I can't remember, Erin Sullivan might be, should we credit, because you talk about the retrograde cycles, and I said, no idea, but I mean, she wasn't doing that full cyanotic cycle, but because somebody else had written about it, it was so the fact they'd written about it, you know, like they thought about the only other person that had written about retrograde cycles, and thought that I must have taken it from there.
So that's funny. So one of the things that I'm really grateful for is that every morning and every evening I live in a house with a garden, and I look at the sky and I can say, that's Jupiter this morning, that's Jupiter, that's Venus. And that is something that astrologers should be able to do, you know, in identifying planets in the sky. So Deb,
I mean, there's times when I wouldn't be able to identify them, but then there's other times when they are strong. And yeah, we should be able to know, you know, because they're shouting at us. And so, you know, when I have a garden and I have I make it a policy, my garden seat facing south, and you know, I just love to look at the stars and the planets, and I always think the moon is the really collective unification of us all, because we all look at the moon, and if we're outside at night, we can't help but look at the moon. And how many of us, like, I sit there looking at the moon thinking, so many people looking at you, moon, right now. You know?
Yeah. It's funny. I have a funny anecdote. I went out for a walk in the evening with my sister a couple of weeks ago, and I said, look, that's Venus. And she said, that's impossible. That has to be an airplane. It can't be that a planet is so bright. Oh yes, it can, but we're not used to looking at the sky. So Deb, let me tell you I don't want to take up more your time. I know you're so busy, but sometimes I find it difficult to express or to give students the right expectations. I mean, this course is difficult. it entails a lot of commitment. Some people just studied astrology for, a couple of years, and they don't even know how to how to delineate an aspect, and they already want to do horary. How do you express this concern? It's difficult, you need commitment, but you can do it. I mean, I don't want people to think that it's impossible, you know?
Of course, it's difficult. I don't think it is difficult because I don't think that there's anything in it that anybody that is truly committed and ready to take it cannot understand. It's not mathematically challenging.
Mm-hmm.
Get them rethinking the way that they conceptualize things. We've got to open up their minds to be prepared to come at this a different angle. But I think that providing there is dedication to go through the material, I don't think it is difficult. Now, it does need, as we say, to start this course, there needs to be good, solid understanding of all the basic principles of astrology. I used to do this as an advanced level course for astrologers that are, like trained astrologers. But really, we don't need them to know about anything about horary before they start the course. They don't need to know about everything needed. They need to know a good understanding of the signs of the zodiac, the planets, the planetary symbolism, what's the basic meanings of the aspects, and just your basic principles. That we don't need them to know more, and a lot of it will be about taking out what they think they already know. We will be saying, let that go and let's rebuild again the same basic in principles, signs, planets, aspects. How we'll
Yeah.
put them in a different way.
Sorry.
Well, the difficulty is only in the sense that you cannot do this course without attending to it. You can't audit the course. You can't come in as a passive observer and think, I'll just pay the money and I'll subscribe and, I'll dip in now and again and I'll get the certificate. That won't happen. You have to have a regular commitment. You have to query the things you don't know and understand. They will be explained to you. And I don't think it's difficult in the sense that I cannot do many things. I can't do mathematics is a challenge for me. I'm a Taurian with a simple brain, so that people do not have to be masterminds in order to progress it. But the dedication and the commitment, I think, is what it needs.
The comment I had from the course is that many astrologers who took it had been working as astrologers for decades. And they say that after this course, they feel like real astrologers. They said, now we feel like we have graduated. I'm a real astrologer. I feel confident. My knowledge is consistent. I feel, yes, confident with my knowledge. I think that is a plus. Also, of course, reading horary is wonderful, but also this is another advantage of taking this course. People are saying, right now, I feel like I'm a serious professional astrologer, but I have to go through the process.
In terms of difficulty, there are so many courses out there that are much more difficult than this and much more complicated and actually end up taking you nowhere. And I've had that reaction many, many times, Maria, of people saying, I've been doing this for decades and I wish I'd done this. I could have saved myself a lot of heartache. The drive is to make it real. Now, remember, the motivation has come from me being a practitioner, wanting to provide the support material for other genuine, sincere, committed astrologers who are going to be practitioners, working with clients who are coming to us with problems, who need strong, mature practitioners, working with them. So I'm not interested in astrology as a theoretical, abstract subject that we can argue about and discourse about. I'm in this course, we're interested in where practitioners together, and this subject, we are guided, we are aided, Maria, because I always think I'm the most blessed person in the world, because I spend my life teaching doing exactly what I love to do. And I'm teaching the most magnificent and interesting and fascinating subject in the history of the whole world anyway.
Yeah, I
Astrology is
agree.
the most fascinating subject, and horror is the most amazing, fascinating facet of astrology. So how more, lucky can we be, but to
Yeah.
spend our lives in this amazing, magical subject? So yeah, it's passionate, and it is about, there is an end goal, and we don't care. We give assignments so that people can monitor themselves and test themselves, but that's all academic, because the real goal is come out of this course knowing more about how to make astrology a tool that you use. So
Mm-hmm.
it's great to have that feedback, and that's exactly, utterly what.
A precise rule, because astrology is so precise, and that's what you learn with horary. It can be so precise. It's really flabbergasting. I mean, one is always impressed by the results of a horary. When people give you feedback and you say, "How could I have known this from looking at the planets?" But anyway, Deb, thank you so much for your generous, for your knowledge, for your sharing it. It's a blessing, really.
Can I just make one more final
Oh,
comment?
yes.
Because you're right about the precision, and it is mind-blowing. But another element of what we have to teach in the course is that don't expect that this is something where you learn it enough and you're going to get something churned out to you with a precise answer, because part of the training is about learning to recognize in symbolic terms. And sometimes, you have to put yourself into it. This is you picking and choosing. So there is not a mathematical system that says, do this, do this, do this, here's your answer. It is about knowing that you are the conduit, and it all comes from you, and you have to, it's precise, but it's precise when measured through round symbolic eyes that know how to judge.
And also, you're going to make mistakes in the process, and you're going to learn a lot from those mistakes. So that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
Because once you get an answer, it wasn't as precise as you expected, and you look again at the chart, knowing the outcome. Wow, you learn so much. So that's also something that we need to value. Making mistakes. It's part of the process.
Also, this seems to me that divination is a very mysterious thing, and very often it will hold a little bit back from you, and then later on you see a little piece falling, and it's almost like, I wasn't meant to get that at that time, but now I get it. I see so much more, and magic continues. So
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for your time, Deb.
you're very welcome. It's lovely to see you.
Bye bye.